Chapter 344. On the second day of Luo Ya's arrival in the Abuel Duchy, the night fell and the entire northern region welcomed its grandest celebration after a year. On the streets, the citizens wore new clothes and carried out a grand parade under the lead of a parade band. From the streets to the end of the alleys, the noisy crowd stretched as far as the eye could see. Colorful floats drove past amid the cheers of the crowd. The cursed fireworks on both sides of the street rose into the sky before the sun had completely faded away, pushing the festive atmosphere to its climax in this lively evening. At the same time, the well-dressed men and women entered the banquet hosted by Duke Abuel. The aurora had been regarded as Shia's blessing since ancient times. But just like how the relationships between people varied, the location to view the aurora was also particular. The ancients believed that the closer to the sky, the purer the blessing would be. This was very similar to the customs of the highland tribes in Luo Ya's previous life. In the entire Aurora city, one of the highest places to view the aurora was the blessing square of Duke Abuel's Abuel mansion. But it was a pity that this square wasn't open to the public and only the guests of the Duke's mansion could use it. As for how to become a guest, apart from the powerful nobles of various countries, there was only one way for the rest of the people: to spend money. As long as one attended Duke Abuel's banquet, it didn't matter if they knew each other or not, they would be considered the guests of the Duke. However, the entry fee was clearly marked, which was an eye-opener for Luo Ya. To put it bluntly, this was actually similar to the entrance fee of the Blessing Square. It was not a proper banquet at all. After all, everyone was here for their honeymoon, and couples had no desire to socialize. The so-called banquet was basically two people strolling and eating together, and then flirting while waiting for polar light to appear. As for why they didn't directly sell the entrance fee and insisted on holding a banquet, one of the reasons was naturally that the name of the banquet could be sold at a higher price. Another main reason was that it could avoid the Vatican. The aurora was the legendary blessing of Shia. According to the teachings of the Vatican, anything bestowed by Shia could not be interfered with by others. That was to say, no matter nobles or civilians, they were all equal under Shia's blessing. Therefore, if the blessing square was opened, it meant that anyone could enter at will and outsiders could not interfere. Selling tickets in the square under such circumstances was tantamount to selling Shia's blessing as a commodity, which was undoubtedly a serious violation of the doctrine and a great disrespect to Shia. Obviously, no one could bear such a huge crime. However, it was impossible to let people spend so much money to build the blessing square for free. Thus, 200 years ago, Duke Aberville had a flash of inspiration and came up with this idea, which was to take it for his own use. Private territory not being open to the public is reasonable and legal, right? I'm watching the aurora with my friend at home. It's not against the teachings, right? As for how many friends I have, it's none of your business. Don't ask. If you ask, it means that you love to make friends. If you come for the first time, you'll be a new friend, and if you come for the first time, you'll be an old friend. Because of this anecdote, Duke Aberville became a proverbial joke in the northern part of the Austin Empire. It was used to describe friends who were greedy for money or friends who had no real feelings for each other. Without a doubt, this was a very disreputable joke for the Duke's family. However, it had to be said that the nobles in the northern part of the Austin Empire were different from the nobles in other places. The harsh environment made them more pragmatic. Compared to the gold coins that could be used to buy supplies for the winter, they didn't care about the empty reputation. Furthermore, the Aberville family was not a complete miser. Looking at the exquisite desserts on the table and listening to the performance of a famous orchestra in the Austin Empire, the black-haired young man couldn't help but nod slightly. He felt that the money was well spent. As if noticing Luo Ya's gaze and actions, the black-haired girl's voice sounded at the right time. Are you hungry? Chapter 345. In the noisy hall, Noah Eyre Heathcliff, who had become a staff member of the event, was wearing a white robe and a veil. He looked at the couples below without saying a word, but his eyes were darting around quickly. As the next generation leader of the Holy See, Noel was naturally in awe of Aurora, who was known as Shia's blessing. Unfortunately, she, who had become a blessing through the Holy See's arrangement, did not have the heart to bless the crowd. It was better to say that she only had one name in her heart. Luoya, caught. As the saying goes, snakes have their own paths. In terms of finding people, Nuo Iyer was naturally inferior to Xia Luot, who was proficient in all kinds of metaphysical astrology. However, that didn't mean that she didn't have any advantages. Nuo Iyer's advantage was actually very simple. She had a lot of people and a lot of influence. In the entire Xia region, although the nobles had power and influence, most of them had their own areas of activity. For example, the Akot family naturally had a lot of say in the Church of Saint Maester, but outside the church, their influence was greatly reduced by the local nobles. As the saying goes, a strong dragon can't suppress a snake in its own territory. However, there was an exception to this situation. If there was anyone in this world who dared to say that they wouldn't be suppressed when they went out, and who dared to say that their influence reached every corner of the world, then there was only one answer, and that was the Heathcliff family. Because as the saying goes, Xia's light shines on everyone, and wherever there are people, there will be a church. The nobles of a place may be despised, but the church will always be the place where people gathered their faith. As for bullying the church, wouldn't that mean they were tired of living? Therefore, although Nuo Iyer had never been to the northern region before, with the influence of the local church, she was able to mobilize a large number of people in a short period of time. Under the guise of giving blessings to the couples, she unknowingly searched the entire hall, carpet-checked all the men of suitable age, and looked for traces of the black-haired boy. Although this method was primitive, there was no doubt that it was effective. In fact, she did feel as if she had found something. It was an inexplicable feeling that flashed through her heart when she scanned the couples dancing and laughing in the hall. It could also be described as an intuition, and she had vaguely found the source of this feeling. On the dance floor. Just now, I felt like I saw something familiar. What is it? With this thought in mind, the blonde girl slowly approached the dancing crowd. On the other hand, Lillian Archman was instantly anxious. I'm going to be found. Such a thought emerged in her mind. Unlike Luot, Nuo Iyer was Luoya's childhood sweetheart. They had been together since the age of 9. Luoya's body. Except for the long hair, Luoya, there was no difference. Nuo Iyer, and Luo Iyer. I can't let her see Roha's face. Chapter 346. Life Sphere was a curse vessel invented hundreds of years ago to search for the remains of the dead in the Mutants' War. Now, hundreds of years later, it had become the standard for wives who stayed at home for a long time. Its principle was simple, and its function was simple, but it was because of this that it was particularly effective. No matter how far the distance was, no matter how the owner's body changed, the life sphere would lead the two to meet again. Today, this function was best explained. Elder brother. Amidst the worried shouts, the silver-haired girl broke through the window and entered. The first thing she saw was something she couldn't believe. Not far in front of her, two people in the room were looking at her in shock. One of them was a woman that Ai Lizzie didn't know at all, and the other was a child. A child with the appearance of Luoya. When Ai Lizzie saw the child who looked like Luoya, her face turned pale as if she was struck by lightning. She could only think of one possibility. Elder brother had an affair with a wild woman and had a child. The moment she thought of this possibility, Ai Lizzie's big eyes immediately turned red, and she felt like the sky was about to collapse. If it was Nuo Iyer and Xia Luot, then it would be fine. Considering the family background and many other factors, Ai Lizzie was actually prepared that Luoya couldn't refuse them in the deepest part of her heart. But no matter what, he couldn't be with a wild woman, and even have a child. I didn't do that kind of thing with elder brother, what a joke. You guys are, Ai Lizzie. Huh? In front of the girl who pointed at the two tremblingly, Luoya finally recovered from the sudden change and called out the girl's name. Hearing Luoya's voice, Ai Lizzie was also taken aback, then she blinked and calmed down a little. Wait, it doesn't seem right. If it's elder brother's child, then it's a little too old. This age seems to be about the same as when I first met elder brother. If we cut back, it's almost 7 or 8 years old. This. Even in a region where the body's development speed is much faster due to magic essence, it's theoretically impossible. Of course, it can't be ruled out that some families have special talents or some specialties in source substances, but the Akot family is obviously not in this list. Chapter 347. In the rain of exploding gravel, Luoya, whose body glowed, experienced the most helpless moment since he awakened extraordinary power at the age of 9. Without the curse attribute, the gravel could only pose a threat to ordinary people. Soldiers of source rank 6 could avoid being injured by brandishing their weapons. Soldiers of source rank 5 could release their curse to send the gravel flying. Soldiers of source rank 4 and above were even worse. But now Luoya had no curse power. He only had the protection of the curse vessel given by the 2 girls, so he could only hold his head and squat in the gravel. Yes, at the moment of the battle, Lillian stuffed a bracelet into Luoya's arms, and A.I. Lizzie also threw out a pendant. The 2 curse vessels were activated at the same time under the intense curse power environment. The protective light directly wrapped Luoya like a rice dumpling. Then, there was no then because both sides had no time to care about Luoya. Under the moonlight, dozens of silver-white birds flew from the silver moon, hovering in the sky and falling. Each of them had a curse power fluctuation that made Lillian vigilant. Under the moonlight, A.I. Lizzie, who was almost immobilized by the huge curse power, also regained her mobility. Son of Tsangyin, this bloodline was the top bloodline of silver rank. There were almost no side effects. While it brought infinite vitality to the holder, it also brought a lot of room for free development. A.I. Lizzie was a typical example. Every bird here was a life storage that the girl had accumulated her curse power and vitality to produce a qualitative change. Therefore, although Elisa looked like she was only at source rank 4, the curse techniques she used could actually reach source rank 3. Blowing up the roof seemed to be an unplanned act of impulse, but in fact, it was the silver-haired young lady who was in the middle of the battle. After this wave of reinforcement, the flames of war were finally ignited uncontrollably. Luoya and I are destined to be together. This is the fate brought by the bloodline. Our combination will continue the bloodline that countless ancestors have preserved with great difficulty in a better form. This is our responsibility and obligation. Bloodline? Are you talking about the bloodline that made Big Brother go through so much danger and pain? You can continue that kind of thing by yourself. Improve the Akot family's bloodline and use my perfect. The next generation will definitely be happier. It seems that the contradiction can't be reconciled. Yes. The final communication came to an end in the fierce collision of thoughts between the two, followed by an explosive torrent of curse power. A.I. Lizzie unleashed her full strength in the face of an opponent of a higher level. The silver-white bird turned into source rank 3 flame curse and rushed at the black-haired girl. On the other hand, several soldiers with golden light shields appeared in front of Lillian. The Sun Shield of the Sun Flame Army was an immunity shield made by gathering the top fire attribute curse vessels. It had excellent resistance to flames. Under the protection of this shield, Lillian didn't move. The flame tornado was like a breeze in her eyes, and it also blocked most of the impact for Luoya behind her. The intense confrontation between the 3rd level of the source grade was unfolding on the tall bell tower. Such a huge commotion naturally attracted the attention of the people in the Blessing Plaza. Faced with such a sudden outbreak of chaotic fighting, some of the couples in the festival began to disperse, but more people were watching the show. In the chaotic crowd, Go Lacey led Rose's elites and quickly approached Xia Luot, who was standing with the upper nobles of various countries. Miss. That's. Chapter 348. At the edge of the palace under the moonlight, the blonde girl looked at the boy in front of her with a forced smile. On the other side, Xia Luot lowered her head as if she thought of something. She walked slowly from behind Noah Iyer with a heavy expression. In front of the two, the black-haired boy's eyes widened and trembled slightly. After a moment, he forced a smile and asked. Noah Iyer, what are you talking about? Our relationship is. We've been lovers since we were 9 years old. Although we've never said it out loud, you know about it, right? Looking at Noah Iyer, Luoya widened her eyes and her lips trembled slightly. The blonde girl sighed and whispered. Since we were young, you've always known about it, but you've always avoided it. Because of our identities, I didn't blame you and even endured a lot of things for this relationship. But this time, it's beyond my tolerance limit. Noah Iyer said with disappointment in her eyes. The reddish-haired girl turned her head silently with a sad expression on her face. Without a doubt, whether it was Noah Iyer or Xia Luot, they were both one in a million geniuses. They had a high status in their respective countries and countless pursuers. They weren't weak and cowardly girls who relied on men. On the contrary, they had their own strong self-esteem. Because the relationship with Luoya wasn't easy and their love was too deep, both of them suppressed themselves to a certain extent for Luoya and even acquiesced to each other's existence. But this time, the situation was different. Remember. After pondering for a moment, the blonde girl clenched her hands and looked at the boy in front of her. Now, your body must have suffered some side effects. You don't have much resistance, but it's different from Xia Luot. This time, you took the initiative to leave us, right? The moment he heard Noah Iyer's words, the black-haired boy's body trembled. Upon seeing his reaction, Xia Luot's eyes teared up sadly. Although Xia Luot didn't meet Luoya directly and didn't know the boy's reaction, Xia Luot witnessed the boy and Lillian hugging on the balcony. No matter how she looked at it, it didn't seem like he was forced. So if he wasn't forced or deceived, what was this behavior? It was no different from the elopement written in the letter. Chapter 349. It's the aurora. The moment the pink aurora appeared in the night sky, cheers sounded from all directions in the city. In front of the empty palace, the three people who were hugging each other widened their eyes in shock. Pink aurora, this is a rare color in the history of Abbeville. Among the 7 colors of aurora, cyan, blue, yellow, green, purple, red, and pink, legend has it that it represents love the most. Following the appearance of this blessed aurora in the night sky, fireworks also rose in the city, embellishing the aurora and drawing a picture of the sky. Under this beautiful scenery, the two girls became emotional. But what they didn't know was that this beautiful aurora would create unexpected results in strange ways. It's actually pink. The last time I heard it was decades ago. The blessing of the pink aurora is a good sign. Hee hee, it's really suitable for us lovers. It's so beautiful. But speaking of lovers, it must be me and darling, right? Looking at the aurora in the sky, the two girls took the blessing on themselves. The contradictory statement made Noah Iyer and Xia Luot frown at the same time, then they looked at each other. Hey, what are you talking about? Don't forget that I was the one who lied. Cough cough. I'm saying that I let darling discover the mistake. You're just a bystander, you didn't even say anything. I didn't say anything. Isn't it because of the plan? I'm saying that it's because your speech was too surprising. Looking at the beautiful aurora in the sky, Noah Iyer and Xia Luot had a disagreement for the first time, and they started to quarrel. But hearing the first few words in their conversation, Luoya suddenly felt that something was wrong. Wait, lie. Plan. Why do I feel like I've been tricked? The black-haired boy widened his eyes, looking at the two who noticed the change in his expression. Recalling the previous scene, he suddenly felt a strong sense of inconsistency. Wait, something's wrong, no. Not just a little, it's a lot wrong. Noah Iyer said that the relationship started when we were 9 years old. Is there such a thing? Starting when we were 9 years old, I've been avoiding you, right? And I do have feelings for you, and it's very strong. But lovers? We didn't even confess to each other, right? Usually, we don't spend much time together. As for intimacy, After so many years, we only kissed because of the treatment in the history fragment, right? What kind of lover was this? Thinking about it, I did have the identity of Xia Luo's fiancé and protection, but I don't think we were lovers. Xia Luo didn't say anything. Chapter 350. In the sky above Aberville, the aurora continued to blossom under the cheers of the people. On the steps outside the palace, the black-haired young man gazed at the pink radiance, and the anger in his heart gradually subsided as time passed. Noah Iyer and Xia Luo had admitted their mistake of deceiving him and apologized. After the commotion, Luoya gradually calmed down under their coaxing and pestering. But more importantly, he realized another more serious problem. It was indeed shameful and infuriating that he was tricked and even cried. But after the initial emotional outburst, Luoya recalled that Noah Iyer and Xia Luo racked their brains to trick him because they liked him. But because of this, Luoya couldn't help but think about a lot of problems. All along, Luoya's feelings had been drifting too much. When they were young, Luoya could still use age as an excuse. But as time passed, this situation couldn't be ignored anymore. It was a fact that Luoya and the girls around him weren't lovers. Because of this, he had been restraining himself from taking the initiative to get close to them. But it was also a fact that their feelings for each other were much deeper than lovers. They had gone through great hardships and were engraved in their bones. But it was precisely because of this that Luoya became more and more hesitant and didn't know what to do. The most fundamental reason was his instability. Of course, Luoya could accept all the good intentions of the girls. It was also ethically feasible. It wasn't anything new for a noble like Xia to have several wives. His father, Ka Dia, even encouraged him to have more children. But the fundamental problem wasn't this. It wasn't even the conflict between the girls. The fundamental problem was that if Luoya established a relationship with them and one day, he suddenly disappeared for 2 hours and reappeared as a corpse, what should they do? Just like Xia's law, great power came with a price. The bloodline of the Akhet family had brought him both glory and disaster. If Luoya's death in the historical fragment was only a guess in the past, then this time, after facing Plist, he had personally experienced the reality of it. Source Level 1. That was a powerful existence that he couldn't resist. Apart from that, the Witch Queen also brought him the problem of the uncertainty of the ancient gods. Everything told him that the historical fragment wasn't a gentle level-up checkpoint. Instead, it was a dangerous place where he could lose his life if he wasn't careful. Even Luoya himself had goosebumps at the thought of dying in front of his lover because of a historical fragment. Once this happened, perhaps even the strongest Noah Iyer wouldn't be able to bear the impact of his lover's death. As for Ai Lizzie, Luoya didn't even dare to think about it because she was too extreme. He didn't dare to touch or mention it, but his feelings were there, making it impossible for him to shake off the girl's hands. This was the reason why he had always gone with the flow. This time, when he was together with Lillian, he was also going with the flow. However, this attitude of neither admitting nor objecting was starting to get out of hand. Luoya's attitude due to the worry in his heart and the girl's urgent desire to establish a relationship with him had turned into a sharp contradiction. This incident was actually a microcosm of this, so he had to find a way to resolve it as soon as possible. The fear of sudden death and the irrepressible worry in his heart made Luoya shiver while he was deep in thought. Noah Iyer beside him was surprised to see this. Luoya, what's the matter? It's nothing. It's just a little cold. Noah Iyer's eyes slowly widened when she saw Luoya forcing out a smile. Xia Luo also realized that there was something wrong with Luoya, but when they saw Luoya's comforting smile, the two of them exchanged glances and didn't know what to say. Chapter 351. Luoya Akhet felt that today's aurora was meaningful. At least, it made him understand something. The girls wanted to establish a stable relationship with the constant danger brought about by historical fragments. This was a contradiction. But was this contradiction really unsolvable? No, there was a way, but it was a method that Luoya would never use in the past. Luoya wasn't sure if the bloodline ability could be actively turned off, but he knew that it was terrifying. There were no signs at all, and the mechanism was uncertain. After entering the historical fragment, it was unknown whether one would live or die. But one thing was certain, and that was the activation of the bloodline ability could be traced. The cheers of the crowd in the distance continued. On the steps of the palace, Noah Iyer and Xia Luot became more and more uneasy in silence. Ai Lizzie was rarely worried in front of Luoya. She intuitively felt that something was wrong with Luoya, but she didn't know what Luoya was thinking. She didn't know where to start. Time passed bit by bit. When Ai Lizzie couldn't bear it anymore, Luoya finally withdrew his gaze from the sky. He looked at the girls in front of him, thought for a moment, and said, "Sorry, I made you worry." It's nothing, it's just. Big brother, what are you thinking? I'm thinking about the problem I've always had. Looking at the worried Ai Lizzie and Noah Iyer and Xia Luot who were silently waiting for him, Luoya was moved. He sorted out his thoughts and said, "For so long, because of the danger of the bloodline ability, I've been subconsciously avoiding making some decisions. I don't want to implicate others, and I'm afraid of causing irreparable consequences. But the result is a kind of destruction to other people's hearts. I've unknowingly done a lot of such things. I'm sorry." Luoya. Hearing the black-haired youth's apology, the three girls had different reactions. Ai Lizzie, who had always been focused on eating desserts, didn't have much of a reaction. Xia Luot felt something, but because they had only known each other for a year, it wasn't that strong. Only Noah Iyer, Luoya's childhood sweetheart, who was rejected the most because of some special hobby, felt the deepest. But when she thought of the bloodline ability that Luoya mentioned, she couldn't help but frown. "Luoya, I know what you're thinking, but the bloodline ability can't be changed. Great power must come with a price. This is an iron law that can't be broken," Miss Angel said softly. Hearing this, Xia Luot's expression turned heavy. She had experienced the Golden Ship's adventure together with Luoya, so she was very clear about the historical situation. She also understood the youth's concerns. In front of Luoya, Ai Lizzie frowned. She thought of the youth's bruises after activating his bloodline ability. Seeing the different reactions of the girls, Luoya's heart felt heavy. He paused for a moment and continued. "Yes, the balance between power and price is indeed an iron law, but what if I give up a part of the power?" Chapter 352. Under the aurora, Luoya stared blankly at the silver-haired girl in front of him. He still didn't understand the fact that he was the dessert. Beside him, the princess and young miss who were originally immersed in a relaxed and happy atmosphere also widened their eyes. Both of them fixed their gazes on Ai Lizzie and were shocked. When a set of rules is established, most people's first reaction is to abide by it, but some people's first reaction is to find loopholes. Ai Lizzie was a typical example in their hearts. To put it simply, this child doesn't care about martial ethics. Everyone is happy, why is it that you're the only one who's different? You said that after graduation, why do you want to sneak away before graduation? But, if you think about it carefully, it seems to make sense. The blonde girl and the reddish-brown girl thought so and immediately discovered their previous blind spot. Luoya's solution was indeed not a problem, but in order to fulfill this agreement, he needed time to break through the possibility of controlling the bloodline, just like a carriage that just started running on the road. After setting the graduation time, the carriage naturally has a direction, and when it reaches the end, there will be delicious desserts to taste. Everything is fine, but the problem is, why do I have to share the carriage with others? Look at this road, it's long and wide, why can't a few people lie down? This carriage is not spacious, and there is only one dessert. If I kick others down, won't I be able to eat it alone at the end? Thinking of this, whether it was Xia Luot or Noah Iyer, they stared at Luoya with unprecedented fervor. The relaxed and happy atmosphere created by the youth's long speech was destroyed by Ai Lizi's words, and Luoya, who was in the middle of the situation, also felt that something was wrong. The black-haired youth blinked and looked at the three smiling girls beside him, and suddenly felt a chill down his spine. What kind of look is this? Did I say something wrong? Luoya was puzzled, and the three girls were thinking of their own plans. That's right, the outcome of this battle didn't need to be decided at the end. Wouldn't it be perfectly fine to kick someone off the stage to seal the victory? Regarding Akate's understanding of Roha, the girls present could be said to be experts, so they understood his biggest weakness, that is, he was slow when it comes to feelings. This slow doesn't mean that he can't perceive other people's feelings, but it means that he can't tell which is love, or it can be said that everyone hasn't reached that stage yet. Noah Iyer and Xia Luot were close friends with Luoya. Their families also supported each other. Ai Lizi and the young man relied on each other for survival and were spoiled to the bone. Their relationship with Luoya was indeed far beyond that of ordinary lovers, but in fact, everyone's feelings for him were a complex mixture, not pure to the point of love. Right now, Luoya's plan was just a plan to eliminate everyone's uneasiness, but it had nothing to do with reaching the top. Everyone was at the door, and whoever kicked in would win. As for sharing after winning, wasn't that a joke? Love is war. The loser eats the dust. Chapter 353. When the black-haired young lady suddenly appeared behind Luoya, the atmosphere in front of the main hall tensed up instantly. Noah Iyer, Xia Luot, and Ai Lizi stopped in their tracks at the same time, gazing at Lillian in disbelief. This woman is here. How is that possible? This thought flashed through their minds almost at the same time. And the reason was simple. Be it Noah Iyer or Xia Luot, they had sent all their elites to intercept Lillian. They weren't sure about Ai Lizi, who arrived later, but it should be about the same. In that case, the three parties had sent more than 5 powerhouses above the level of origin class to intercept Lillian. But even with such a powerful encirclement, it only lasted for such a short time. The black-haired young lady's powerful strength made the other 3 girls frown deeply. They naturally didn't know that the people they sent to restrain Lillian had already been restrained by Lillian, who had a large army under her control. Although Lillian was powerful, it was impossible for her to do anything in a short time in the face of so many elite troops from the Vatican, Louis, and Akate territory. But even if they couldn't defeat her, they could still surround her. After all, no matter how many troops they had, they couldn't compare to Lillian. But it had to be said that Lillian didn't dare to act rashly after leaving behind a large number of troops to restrain the elite troops of the 3 girls. Although Lillian was furious with the sudden appearance of Luoya's adopted sister, Ai Lizi, her strength was solid. Although she was only at level 4 of the origin class, her combat strength could reach level 3 of the origin class. As for Noah Iyer from the Vatican and Xia Luot from Louis, they definitely had their trump cards. Lillian wasn't sure how much explosive power they could unleash in a short time. Of course, the most important thing was Luoya's feelings and political factors. In front of the main hall, Lillian and the 3 girls looked at each other from a distance. But before they could speak, Luoya, who was being hugged, returned to her senses and broke the silence first. Senior sister, I have something to tell you first. After a long silence, Luoya mustered the courage to look at Lillian and said so solemnly. The black-haired young lady couldn't help but be taken aback. Lillian blinked and instinctively felt that Luoya seemed to have recovered some of his mind. Remember. At this thought, the black-haired young lady nodded and let the young man go. Luoya spoke softly about the series of decisions he just made, including the possibility of going into seclusion in the future. But what surprised him was that Lillian, who also had the bloodline of the Akate family, didn't react strongly to his thoughts. Of his thoughts instead, she narrowed her eyes and fell silent in silence. Luoya's dream was to have a stable family. This was a beautiful wish that any normal human would have. But it was a pity that in this world, apart from small families, there were also big families and the general trend of history. The Achates family produced many heroes. Was it really because they were born to be heroes? No. From a certain perspective, it was a combination of internal education and external environment that created heroes. Luoya grew up without any guidance. He understood the thoughts of the weak the best. That was why he couldn't stand the trampling of the weak by evil and calamity. His personality of hating evil and never giving in was actually the biggest unstable factor. When a disaster happened, when humanity as a whole was facing a crisis, the young man named Luoya would definitely step forward bravely. No matter how much he prayed for peace, he was still an Achates in his bones. His kindness, justice, and benevolence were purer than most awakened in the Achates family. Of course, there was also the possibility that the human world was peaceful during the period Luoya lived in. But this possibility was very small after the appearance of the mutants at the human borders. Chapter 354. In the atmosphere that was so solemn that it sent chills down one's spine, a group of fully armed troops suddenly walked out from the shadows. They walked with their heads held high, and they stood out from the crowd. They were like the apostles of God, and their holy white robes were spotless under the moonlight. Their disdainful aura was revealed with their every move. The St. J Society. In the face of danger, they had stepped forward bravely. Luoya was stunned when he saw the sudden appearance of the group. The girls who were on the verge of exploding stopped and turned around. Under everyone's gaze, Francis puffed out his chest and nodded in satisfaction. The arrogance and compassion that belonged to the apostles of God was revealed on his face. The lost lambs would always show such a look when he appeared. It wasn't strange at all. After all, Francis also felt that their appearance was so sudden and unexpected, just like the precision and elegance of their swordsmanship. Launching a surprise attack during a festival was a tactic that could catch the enemy off guard. And today's situation was even more suitable for him to take advantage of the situation. Before he rushed over, Francis had carefully observed the situation and found that the capital of Aberville was unusually chaotic today. Not far away, a large-scale armed fight was going on. Judging from the nature of the curse power, it should be a conflict between the Holy See and the heretics. After a visual inspection, he also found the Loche gem magic and suspected the Austin Empire's army. When he saw this, he knew that the best opportunity had come. Religious conflicts, national hatred, these were all conflicts that couldn't be resolved. Once a war started, it wouldn't stop until one side was completely defeated. And this was the situation that Francis liked the most. Opportunities that could only be encountered by chance always came quietly, just like luck knocking on the door. It had to be said that Luoya, as a blasphemous sinner, was indeed cunning. He actually used a certain method to conceal himself from many curses, including prophecy spells. However, this method of concealing his whereabouts also blocked his escape route, leaving him empty. There were many forces that wanted to help him, but so what? Who else could find such a target other than them who had the Saint Envoy? And the facts proved this point. 1 source rank level 3 and 3 source rank level 4. This was the defensive strength of the targets under the hammer of the god spirit, unable to withstand a single blow. Look, even he was trembling in fear. Looking at the trembling black-haired young man in front of him, Francis, who was confident in his victory, revealed a proud smile. However, he didn't know that in Luoya's eyes, he was the real saint hero, the only designated savior. What a group of cute people. Looking at the familiar white robes and the members of the Saint Hero Society under the moonlight, Luoya felt his eyes welling up. He looked at the girls around him, and noticed that Noah Iyer and the others were naturally vigilant. This group of people. Chapter 355. Under the night sky, when the Austin Empire's cavalry took the lead to attack the Saint Heroes Society's action team, Director Francis finally realized what was going on here. Previously, the Saint Heroes Society judged that Luoya Akat had entered a period of weakness. With the help of a few guards, she blended into the crowd to avoid trouble and cut off contact with all parties. However, based on the current situation, this statement was obviously wrong. The conflict between the Vatican and the infidels, the conflict between the Austrian Empire and Locks, everything was just a show to lure them into the trap. This demon child even pretended to be harmless and acted innocent here. God! What kind of scheming was this? What a sinister and vicious person. Is this the enemy of God? At this time, in the sky, birds composed of curse power and vitality were flocking from the boundless moonlight. They followed the AI Lizzie's outstretched hand and guided the destructive curse to attack below. The silver-haired girl's eyes were as red as blood, and boundless killing intent mixed with the attack poured down. To put it simply, she was a bomb. The moment the AI Lizzie made a move, Francis was surprised to find that he was targeted by as many as 2 digits of Source Level 3 curses. Even with the strength of Source Level 2, it was difficult to resist so many attacks. After a short consideration, the middle-aged man chose to retreat, but he didn't know that such an action made him miss the best opportunity. Noah Iyer stretched her wings of light into her arms and took out a curse vessel containing crystal water droplets with layers of seals. Her hand touched the box-like curse vessel, and then she was surrounded by countless brilliance. Layers of brilliance surrounded her body and penetrated into her skin like silk. "Dear, come to me." On the ground, Xia Luo's golden souls began to surge like never before. The liquid curse vessel covered Luo Ye's defenseless body like a wave. Obviously, this amount was definitely not normal, but what shocked Luo Ye even more was that the golden souls surrounding him seemed to be abnormal too. Obviously, Lillian's powerful strength gave Noah Iyer and Xia Luo a lot of pressure, so the two came prepared this time. But perhaps even they themselves didn't expect that the preparation to deal with Lillian would become the Saint Heroes Society's death warrant. So what if her strength reached Source Level 3? In the end, she just barely reached her level. But was Lillian's strength really brought about by Source Level? In the sound of the horn, groups of light armor axemen rushed out in the light of Lillian's curse power and began to rush quickly toward the cultists who were confused by the cavalry's charge and AI Lizzie's indiscriminate bombardment. What righteous poisonous flying daggers and blackened poisonous spears. Anyway, they were all shameful things, but there was one thing that was very good, and that was the ability to kill others. Lillian did not forget what this battle was about. Now that the 4 families had joined forces, the end of this group of cultists had already been decided. But she was not here to kill the cultists, she was here to snatch Luo Ye. This woman has no morals. The liquid golden souls condensed and boiled in her hand, then turned into an undetectable golden wind under the aurora and swept in the direction of the Saint Heroes Society. They entered the nostrils and mouths of the cultists who were fighting fiercely, and then penetrated into their bodies. A shameless trap, a vicious weapon, and a sinister curse. "I'll kill you all." The middle-aged director, who was both sad and angry, burst out with a violent curse power, driving the battle into a white-hot state. In the distant buildings, several figures began to silently observe the commotion. Chapter 356. The distribution of war achievements was not easy to verify, especially when there were several forces mixed together, and the situation of fighting for the head began to appear. That was why Francis was scared. He did not know about the others, but he knew that he was being targeted. Therefore, he chose to go all out. The highest belief of the Saint Heroes Society was the Mother Goddess, who possessed power far beyond that of ordinary gods. However, it was clear that even as a director of the Saint Heroes Society, the sleeping Mother Goddess would not pay attention to him. The directors of the Saint Heroes Society were well aware of this, but there was a problem that could not be ignored. They lacked the support of the gods with the highest combat power among the various sects and organizations other than the Shia Orthodox Church. And Francis was one of the rare ones who could communicate with the Mother Goddess and obtain a part of her power as a director of the Saint Heroes Society. Seeing such a horrifying scene, the soldiers present stopped in their tracks. Luo Ye, who was at the back of the crowd under the protection of the Golden Soul, could not help but shrink her pupils. Although Francis was still in pain, he pulled a smile on his face. Francis said as his body trembled. A large number of his bones were broken, causing his body to curl up. Together with the smoke that rushed out of his body, he looked like a broken bellows in the kitchen. However, to his surprise, after hearing his words, the black-haired boy in the distance was stunned. Then it's all right. When the black smoke of death rushed forward like the Grim Reaper, a wall made of steel shields suddenly appeared and firmly blocked the horrifying spell. At the forefront of the shield formation, a tall and slender woman was exuding a majestic and heavy power. She took the lead and launched a counterattack against Francis. In the past, Francis was almost invincible when using this method of attack. But now, although there was a little girl with the angel bloodline on the opposite side, her strength was far inferior to his. Therefore, he did not care and planned to deal with the others first. The Akkad army was guided by the gods to join Luoya's team. In order to better carry out the mission of protecting Luoya, the two ancient gods had also given them power and blessings. Behind her, Rodney and Wood also stepped out and began to attack. The middle-aged man whose body was glowing red had his muscles bulging. Under his use of the strength source substance, he demonstrated the most primitive aesthetics of violence through close combat. All the black ghosts that wandered around in front of Rodney were smashed into pieces by him. The huge skeletal hand opened its palm, and every time it smashed down, the ghosts formed by the black smoke would be smashed into pieces. The ground trembled under this huge force, and the originally flat square became a construction site. Since when was the strength of Akkad army? As the allies of the Akkad family, although the Vatican and Loche were surprised, they could still accept it. After all, in their eyes, the Akkad family had always been rich in martial arts. As an ally, the stronger the better. However, this scene in front of Lillian's eyes made her deeply shocked. Due to her ability, the girl who was more focused on military matters fell into deep thought. As for Francis, he was already dumbfounded. Why do I feel like I'm going to lose after this big move? Cynthia, you did well. Now, Big Brother is mine. A.I. Lizzie's excited voice was heard, and the girls who saw this magical scene suddenly came back to their senses. Not good, I'm going to lose. What should I do? If this goes on, Shia above. My palace. Do you desire wealth? The brown bear-like man blinked and looked up when he heard the familiar voice. In the light of the spell, Xia Luot Sorofia walked in front of him. The girl stretched out her hand, pointed at the Saint Heroes assembly in the distance, and said in irresistible persuasion, 100,000 gold coins, kill. Chapter 357. Under the light of the spell, Charlotte Sorofia's body seemed to be covered with a layer of golden light in the eyes of Duke Aberville, who was lying on the ground. That was the light of the spell, the light of brilliance, and also the light of wealth. There was nothing that money couldn't solve. If there was, it would mean that there wasn't enough money. As long as it was a problem that could be solved with money, it wasn't a problem. Duke Aberville gazed at the palace complex that had returned to its original state. He looked up at the goddess of wealth in a daze. Xia Luot repeated with a faint smile. The moment Duke Aberville stood up in silence, the entire sky in the northern region seemed to have risen by 3 inches. It was only at this moment that the astonished Luoya recalled the strength of this man who regarded wealth as his life and didn't dare to raise any opinions in front of the young mistresses. Before becoming the Duke of Aberville, this honest-looking man had once made a name for himself in the Austin Empire. But after returning to the country to inherit the title of Duke, decades had passed, and the man nicknamed Explosive Bear had gradually lost his temper. In other words, the prosperity of Aberville could be said to be directly related to the stingy and greedy dukes of the past. Can you convert it into resources? Deal. The moment the trade was completed, Oswald blew his whistle. After a long and penetrating whistle, the ground rumbled. In less than 10 seconds, a gigantic magical bear the size of a bus broke through layers of buildings, bringing along debris and gales. At the same time, a huge meteor hammer appeared in Duke Will's hand. "Where did you get this thing from?" Gazing at the weapon in Oswald's hand, the black-haired young man was dumbfounded. But what surprised him more was that it wasn't just the gigantic bear that was coming. More and more bear-riding warriors were rushing over from afar. With a loud roar, Duke rode a giant bear and charged into the battlefield with a meteor hammer. The Saint Heroes Guild, who had never provoked this bear ancestor, was completely dumbfounded. The giant meteor hammer whistled like the wind and lightning and smashed the head of a level 3 source rank cultist. Noelle could not help but condemn the reddish-haired young lady when she realized that there was a large group of new troops around her. However, Charlotte did not care at all. She kept firing with the jeweled trigger in her hand, the smile on her lips elegant and dignified. "You." After receiving the blessings of the Gulen Dayer and Pei Tila, Cynthia, Rodney, and Wood's body's side effects were greatly reduced. The advantage of being cultists became more and more obvious. Although they were only level 3 source rank, as divine warriors, their combat strength had reached level 2 quasi-source. Looking at his subordinates who were about to die in the distance, Francis was burning with anger. Luo Ya, sinister, cunning, despicable, and shameless. She looked like an innocent and harmless child, but her mind was so deep. "Mother Goddess is watching me. Not good. Retreat. He's going to self-destruct." At this point, there was not much curse power left in Francis's body. However, as long as he sacrificed all his bones, he could completely convert the curse power into death aura. However, if he were to unleash his power aimlessly, the effect of the attack would not be ideal. However, it was more than enough to kill a child who did not have much supernatural power left in his body. "Go to hell." Luo Ya caught. Boom. A violent explosion shook the sky. A black shockwave with the power to suck flesh and blood swept out and swept across the square. Chapter 358. When Francis leaped into the air and launched the final blow to kill Luoya, an unprecedented sense of crisis rose in the heart of the reddish-brown-haired girl. The moment Francis made up his mind, Xia Luo's bloodline fluctuated violently. The unique command of fate made the girl aware of the danger almost subconsciously. In the midst of Francis' hateful roar, the violent explosion with the black smoke with the attribute of God was imminent. Xia Luo, who was familiar with the similar curse mechanism, understood Francis' idea almost instantly and made an emergency response. In Xia Luo's rapid shout, the liquid golden soul instantly wrapped the black-haired boy's body and then ejected into the distance like an airbag. Luoya only saw a golden color in front of his eyes. The next moment, the violent acceleration made him plunge into the inner wall of the golden soul. Unlike the almost gaseous death attack, the golden soul was subject to great wind resistance and was not light. The result of such a race was almost obvious. In a few seconds, the wind of darkness approached step by step. However, just as the death attack was about to catch up with Luoya and give him a fatal blow, a strange spell fluctuation came from the black-haired boy's arms again. Remaining use, 1 second to remember. When the black-haired boy saw the system prompt, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The next moment, a violent shock suddenly descended, causing Luoya to be knocked around inside the golden soul. Boom! Wang! Enchantment! There's an enchantment here, and it's even an enchantment that can block this kind of divine attack. The boy, who had just experienced a crisis, blinked with a blank expression, then looked down at the system. He felt that his eyes were about to tear up. Blessed ear of rice, forever a god. But, this place is, there's someone. In a beautifully decorated room, there was a pink-haired girl in luxurious clothes who was obviously not an ordinary person. She seemed to be pouring tea with a teapot in her hand, and there was a figure in armor beside her. In the silent room, Luoya Akat stared blankly at the two people not far away. The reason for his attention was very simple. Xia had extraordinary powers and various races. Her body was strong because of mutations, and there were countless people with special abilities. Her hair was actually very colorful, just like the girls around Luoya. But it had to be said that even so, there were very few people with pink hair. Luoya paid attention to the pink-haired girl who seemed to be of a different race, but what surprised him even more was the figure in heavy armor beside her. The reason was simple: Luoya knew this person. Looking at the figure wearing heavy armor and observing Luoya with the pink-haired girl, the black-haired young man was stunned for a moment before he captured the information of this person in his mind. What was going on? Why was he here? Ah, wait, so that's how it is. Did he bring his girlfriend here to see the aurora? Aberville was indeed not far from the Kingdom of Knights, Pender. I didn't expect to bump into him here. The black-haired young man who had this thought breathed a sigh of relief and stood up. When he was about to open his mouth to apologize politely and leave, he didn't expect a magnetic exclamation to suddenly come from the armor. In the room, hearing William's exclamation, the black-haired young man widened his eyes and his body instantly stiffened. Chapter 359. In a dark room without lights, the black-haired young man stared blankly ahead. The aurora outside the window penetrated the glass and shone on the figure in heavy armor and the pink-haired young lady, adding a layer of different dreamy colors to them. What's going on? He knows me. It was normal for Luoya to recognize Williams. After all, he had never met him before, but he knew a lot of people. William's features were so obvious that it was hard for him not to remember. However, it was too abnormal for Williams to recognize Luoya. If a person knew the previous Luoya, then there might be some unknown fate between them. But if a person knew the current Luoya, then the problem was too big. The last person who knew him was the Sage Society that wanted to kill him. I see. You must be frightened when I suddenly called your name. But don't worry, Luoya Akat, we are your friends. Not bad. If your current state doesn't affect your memory, you should still remember our reminder in your dream. Hearing William's words, the black-haired young man couldn't help but reveal a surprised expression. After a slight pause, Luoya immediately recalled the nightmare he had on the way to the northern region. Looking at his reaction, the pink-haired young lady picked up the pen on the table and wrote something on the notebook. Then, she raised the notebook gently. Could it be that the one who spoke in the dream was you? Hearing this advice that always appeared at the end of the dream, Luoya stared ahead and couldn't help but ask in surprise. The pink-haired young lady didn't answer and only nodded again. Seeing this, Luoya fell into silence for a moment, and his tensed nerves relaxed slightly. It seems like the two people in front of me are really my allies, but why? Thinking of this question, Luoya raised his head and revealed a puzzled expression. As if sensing the young man's doubts, the figure in heavy armor spoke again. Treader of the ancient will? What are you referring to? Ever since Luoya learned of the existence of the Sage Society of the Twilight, this was the first time he heard this word from someone in this era. The black-haired young man could imagine what it meant. That's right, we are the descendants of the Twilight Sage Guild. Under the light of the aurora and the sparkling fireworks, the affirmative words entered the black-haired young man's ears. While he was shocked, he also sighed. Luoya had such a conjecture for a long time, but as he investigated the Philosophers' Association, he couldn't find anything. This contradiction made him suspect that he had guessed wrongly, but today, William's words proved his conjecture right. Are you the descendants of the members of the Twilight Sage Society? How could he prove this? You should know that in this era, not only friends but also enemies know this name. Chapter 360. Inside the room, the black-haired boy and the pink-haired girl were both stunned when the figure in heavy armor spoke with a serious tone. I'm sorry, what do you mean by joining? The Dawn Council. Luoya thought when he heard the name of William's organization, but he didn't answer. His golden eyes looked at Williams in front of him and he couldn't help but have a feeling in his heart. Although Luoya basically treated Williams and the others as his own people when he confirmed their identities, but even if they were relatives, it would take a few days for them to get familiar with each other. How long has it been since they met? They haven't even established a relationship of trust, and he suddenly said that he wanted to join an organization, as if he knew that his question was a little abrupt, or he realized that his introduction wasn't detailed enough. Williams was a little anxious. He thought for a moment and added, "The Dawn Council is not an organization that randomly recruits members. Instead, it has a referral system and strict examinations. However, for the descendants of the wise ones, the process is simplified. As for you, as an awakened of the Akkad family, you are qualified to join the council directly." Williams explained and said his thoughts. However, Roja, who knew the truth, couldn't help but smile bitterly. Or rather, even if the person who opened this barrier was someone he didn't know, Luoya would still barge in. But of course, he wouldn't say that out loud. In the end, how should he politely refuse, Luoya? The sound of searching for Luoya came with the wind and gradually became louder. The three people in the room paused simultaneously. The black-haired boy tilted his head and looked out of the window. He didn't expect the battle to end so quickly. Luoya, who thought of the reason, came back to his senses. He turned around and looked at the messy room and Williams, who was in front of him. He immediately thought of a solution to this somewhat awkward situation. "I'm very interested in the Dawn Council you mentioned, but as the acting lord of Akkad territory, I can't make such a decision easily. I think it's better for us to discuss this matter further. What do you think?" "Huh? What's going on? Is there something wrong with what I said?" "Sorry, we don't want to have too much contact with the outside world for the time being." Luoya couldn't help but stare blankly at the words in Teresa's notebook. Williams was silent for a long time before he spoke again. "Can't trust. You mean Noah Iyer and the others?" "I was indeed too excited just now. It's normal for you to be confused when I suddenly invited you. Just pretend that I didn't say those words before. But don't worry, we'll meet again soon," the heavy armored man said and gently saluted. Before Roja could react, he put his hand on the shoulder of the pink-haired girl. Teresa held the book in one hand and gently waved at Roja with the other. Then she spoke for the first time since they met. "Wait, you guys, the space spell was a rare spell that almost didn't exist in Shia. How could it be activated with just one sentence?" Such a thought flashed through Luoya's mind. What followed was a sudden explosion of light unique to the transfer spell. The black-haired boy couldn't help but cover his eyes with his hand. After a few seconds, the light weakened. Luoya slowly lowered his hand. Under the moonlight in the room, Williams and Teresa's figures had disappeared. Chapter 361. Luoya. "That's great, you're fine. Ah, Xia Luot, you're here. Is the battle over?" The reddish-brown-haired girl stared into the depths of the room where Luoya was staring and blinked her eyes in confusion. Feeling Xia Luot's confusion, Luoya thought for a moment but didn't say anything. "Nothing, I'm just curious why there's a barrier around this room. Maybe it's a hotel rented by some big shot. He's probably watching the aurora in the Blessing Square, haha." It had to be said that the deterioration of the competitive environment had brought about an inward-looking effect. In this era where there was only one sweet spot, the girls would resort to all means to win, and they were becoming more and more unscrupulous. 1 second remember this encounter with Williams and the others was a complete accident for Luoya, but in general, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. At least it allowed him to obtain a lot of information in advance that he didn't know before. Although a worldwide crisis that could be labeled as such hadn't appeared yet, having an organization to deal with it was naturally better than not having one. However, what made Luoya a little concerned was William's identity. The reason why the Twilight Sage Society was so strong was that it was an organization that transcended the concept of a country. Everyone's actions were for the benefit of the entire human race, and even the intelligent life groups. At times like this, everyone's cohesiveness and purpose would be very strong, and the power that erupted would be very concentrated. Luoya felt that this was an important reason why they could overcome crises one after another. Luoya didn't know the answer to this question, but he felt that this possibility existed, and it was very likely. Unless the royal family of the Kingdom of Knights, Pender, was selfless, it was inevitable that public resources would be used for private purposes. Moreover, their attitude of not wanting to come into contact with outsiders was very strange. In the game, Eye of the Recorder, there weren't any members of the protagonist's team in the encirclement of Luoya, only the male and female protagonists. This led to his main focus for so many years on Noah Iyer and the others, and basically didn't spend any effort on other people. Combining the game and reality, the teenager who understood William's actions sighed at the cowardice of the original Luoya, but then he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He suddenly remembered that before leaving, the armored warrior said that they would meet again soon. I admit that I was a little too hasty. Based on our previous interactions, he seems to be a person who is cautious about joining an organization. Yes, but originally, I thought that he had a chance to directly agree, but he failed. The feeling he gave me was a little different from what I had imagined. I can't describe it, but I feel like it conflicts with my ideals. Maybe it's just my imagination. This chance encounter with Luoya Akut was undoubtedly an unexpected situation, but this kind of encounter also had its advantages, and that was that both sides could see each other's true intentions without much preparation. Defining others based on your imagination and then being disappointed because they don't fit is not a good thing. Chapter 362. In the ruins of the Abbeville mansion, Luoya Akut was pondering over a mathematical problem of the century amidst the clamor of soldiers and the roars of war bears. The black-haired young man was engrossed in his thoughts. Behind him, the young ladies were in a mess. On the night of the silver moon after the aurora vanished, a silver-haired young lady pointed at the charred corpse of a cultist and questioned indignantly. The blonde young lady stood before her with a calm expression. She glanced at the corpse that A.I. Lizzie pointed at and retorted calmly. "You think it's yours just because you say so. What a joke. You used a sword to slash it. Then you should let your sword speak. I should be the one saying that to you. We killed that director named Francis, so it's only natural that we get the most credit." On the other side of the ruins, Noah Iyer and A.I. Lizzie were arguing over the issue of battle merits. The red-haired young lady was busy settling the bill for Duke Abbeville, Lillian was inspecting the corpse at the side, and Luoya was having a headache. As competitors, the girls naturally did not trust others. Therefore, the task of recording the results of the battle had been assigned to the four camps. However, the problem was that after the battle ended, the total number of enemies killed by the four camps was 77. However, the total number of enemies killed was only 69, including Francis who had been blown into ashes. The moment this universal problem appeared, Luoya knew that things would be difficult. And the facts proved it. After the battle ended, Noah Iyer and A.I. Lizzie, who didn't have anything else to settle, started arguing. The other two young ladies probably did the same after settling their own matters. "Luoya, come here for a moment." Upon hearing Lillian's call, Luoya strode over after being taken aback for a moment. Noah Iyer and A.I. Lizzie, who were arguing, looked at each other and stopped arguing as well. The three of them arrived at Lillian's side with one in front and two behind. They found that the Royal Highness was looking down at a corpse on the ground. Luoya felt a chill in his heart when he saw Lillian looking down at the cultist. He thought that Lillian wanted him to judge the prize, but he didn't expect that after approaching, he found that Lillian's expression was very solemn. She didn't seem like she was going to protest at all. The black-haired young man heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that Lillian didn't seem to want to quarrel. Then, he observed the unsightly male corpse on the ground. Luoya scanned the corpse in front of him carefully and realized that this was the conclusion he could draw. But the black-haired young lady spoke with an unpleasant expression. "Similar? How can the bloodline of our family have?" "Wait. Holy emissaries were a very special group of people in the Saint Heroes Society. They had a lofty status, but they did not necessarily have strong strength. One of the great significance of their existence was to be the key to open the so-called holy artifact in the Saint Heroes Society. 400 years ago, Leinster was the wind summoner's egg that had been absorbed by Luoya. Could it be that the so-called holy emissaries were actually artificially cultivated people with similar bloodline to the Akkad family? This possibility does exist, but the bloodline of the Akkad family is too special. What method is used? Hearing the young lady's question, Luoya didn't know how to explain for a while, but he understood one thing. That was, the so-called special curse vessel was definitely problematic. He remembered that the information of the Saint Heroes Society mentioned that it was similar to blood, so the source of this blood, Noah Iyer and A.I. Lizzie didn't know the current situation and seemed a little confused. It wasn't until the reddish-haired young lady came over that Luoya ended his contemplation, and the atmosphere eased. No, it's nothing. Xia Luot, how are the casualties on your side? Xia Luot, who strolled over, said and glanced at Lillian coldly. Luoya, who wanted to change the atmosphere, couldn't help but be stunned. He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. As if confirming his guess, the black-haired young lady frowned when she heard Xia Luot's words. She thought for a moment, and after a moment, she curled the corner of her mouth and spoke back. What did you say? After seeing Aurora and defeating the cultist, Luoya, who was exposed, had no reason to stay in Aberville. Leaving was a matter of course, but just like the previous quarrel, where to go was a problem. In addition, the young ladies also discussed the allocation of time. Noah Iyer, who was at the bottom because she couldn't grab the kill, proposed such a statement to reverse the situation. However, this idea was fiercely resisted by A.I. Lizzie, who had the credit of killing Francis. But that's what you said. What if my dear doesn't want to follow the first place? Hee, A.I. Lizzie, do you still want to force him? What's the difference between that and the Austin kidnapper? Oh, who knows? Can your words be trusted? Are you kidding me? How can my brother not want to go home? No, my dear, you obviously want to go back to Rose with me. I'm officially hired. Don't you think so? My dear. Old woman, that's enough. My brother will definitely choose me. Isn't that right, my dear brother? Luoya's face stiffened as he looked at the young ladies who were gradually focusing on him. His strong desire to live made him feel as if he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Just when he was at his wit's end, the familiar fluctuation of the spell appeared again. Remaining use, 0, this is. Before the young ladies could finish their exclamations, Luoya's body had returned to normal. The familiar feeling of power once again descended upon him, and his brain felt much clearer. Holding the blessed ear of wheat that had lost its effect, the black-haired young man was very excited. Now, he could finally answer the young ladies' questions. Under the night sky, Luoya looked at the young ladies who were still in shock. Just like before, the corner of his mouth curled up and said calmly and gently, I'm going back to Leinster. I'm going back to Leinster. It's time for class. Chapter 363. Father, why do I have to wear these things? Armor, that was something a child of this age would naturally not like. Moreover, this kind of armor was accompanied by a certain degree of pain, it was natural for her to want to take it off. Very simple, according to the ancient prophecy of the Three Races Alliance, there may be a great calamity in the future. As the successor, you must obtain great power, and hide your identity as much as possible. This armor was designed for this purpose. The man's answer was solemn and serious, but to the child's ears, it was no different than usual. The thin and weak child sadly lowered her head, and said with a choked voice. You don't need to play, those noises will only weaken you, you only need to become strong. Silence once again filled the hall, as if feeling that his attitude was too harsh. After a moment, the man walked down from the throne, sighed and opened his mouth to explain. Oath. In other words, as long as I persevere until they reappear, it will be fine. The man pondered for a moment, reached out his hand and stroked the child's head, and smiled. In the dreamscape formed by the memories of the distant past, a name that had been forgotten for many years suddenly lingered in her ears, causing the sleeping girl to abruptly open her eyes and wake up with a start. Why did she suddenly think of her childhood? Was it because she took off her armor today? No, it's rare to take off my armor, I should have slept better. Is there a problem with my body? It was a healthy and beautiful body that had obviously undergone sufficient training. Slender and straight legs, a slim waist without any excess fat, a full chest, and a snow-white neck. At the top of the mirror, what was reflected was a dazzling and beautiful yet strangely dignified face. Draconic aura, this was the symbol of the royal family of knights with dragon blood hidden in her small body, the Khanate family. It was also one of the things that the girl had hidden from the public for many years. But regarding this characteristic of her family, Wilhelmina had always been quite fond of it. But unlike the usual William who exuded a suffocating and dignified aura, after revealing her face, Wilhelmina's temperament as a young girl underwent some changes. Under the draconic aura, it was no longer oppressive and terrifying, but inviolable and noble. Wilhelmina checked her body that was almost perfect because of the dragon's blood. She found nothing. Frustrated, she walked back to her bed and lay down. She had to face the last possibility in her mind. Wilhelmina's heartbeat quickened as she recalled the young man she met under the northern aurora a while ago. She had to admit that the handsome Luoya would have a certain impact on any woman. Even Wilhelmina, who had always treated herself as a man, found it hard to escape. She even hastily sent out an invitation because of that. This time, I can't mess it up again. In the preparation room, a black-haired youth in formal attire was sitting on a chair, trembling as he looked at the letter that the Noa Iyer and Xia Luod had received. Around him, the two youths who were deputy heads of the consulting department were trembling. After reading back and forth twice, Luoya Akat slowly stopped trembling. He raised his head and asked the two candidates in front of him softly with a smile. Hearing his words, the two suspects completely stopped pretending and began to drag each other down. Hearing Luoya's accusation, the dog-headed strategist Geralt slapped his thigh. His expression turned extremely sorrowful in a few seconds. He shook his head and sighed. Squeezing out the tears in his eyes, he said to Luoya. The gray-haired youth said so, sorrowfully and innocently, like a wronged ghost who was dragged into a car. But seeing him like this, Paul Ackman was dumbfounded. Is this a noble? How despicable and shameless. Paul Ackman, who had his hands dirted by Geralt, was stunned for a long time before he finally regained his senses. He turned around and put the blame on Geralt's head. He also revealed the theory of the gray-haired youth to the public. Following Paul's counterattack, the scapegoat competition between the two sides officially began. You wrote it yourself. You were the one who threw the mailbox. When did I say that they absconded to avoid punishment? Why are you slandering people out of thin air? That's elopement. How can it be called avoiding punishment? Luoya, who had been listening for a long time, couldn't help but interrupt the two clowns in front of him. He looked at the two people who were silent after hearing his words, thought for a moment, and sighed helplessly. It was human nature to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. When there was a problem, the two didn't pretend to be indifferent. Instead, they actively acted to help Luoya. There was no doubt that there was a decisive difference, especially when the problem was the elopement of the Austin Empire's princess and Luoya. This was a big deal, and it was definitely not good to get involved. Fortunately, Luoya and the others came back early. If they came back later, Paul would be ready to carry out the so-called Plan B. By then, the matter of him and Lillian eloping and having a child would be widely spread, and it would become an established fact. It would probably be as noisy as the Jiangnan leather factory. The black-haired youth thought for a moment, looked at the two youths, and said softly, Hey! Clean up. Hearing Luoya's punishment after sighing, Paul and Jellic were taken aback. They obviously didn't expect the punishment to be so light. The black-haired youth raised his eyebrows and said with a weird expression, No, I think cleaning up is good. Listening to the two clowns, Luoya shook his head helplessly. He stood up and walked to the door under the gaze of the two. Luoya said and opened the door. The next moment, cheers and applause from the outside poured into the room. In the wave of voices, the black-haired youth turned his head and looked at the two stunned people with a smile. After all, tonight belongs to us. Chapter 364. Tonight, Luoya Akate, Paul Ackman, and Gerlach Stevenson welcomed their first night in St. Freya Academy. Dean Antonio, whose white beard was almost touching the ground, was in high spirits. He wore a white robe with golden threads that he would only wear during a grand ceremony. He stood in the center of the auditorium and spoke to the students. In the face of such a report from an unknown source, Luoya Akate, Paul Ackman, and Gerlach Stevenson didn't ignore it. Instead, they used it as a clue and worked hard to find out the truth. They also joined forces with the security department, which was still in conflict at that time, to observe for several days and successfully destroy the hidden cultist organization in the academy. As soon as Dean Antonio finished his words, the auditorium immediately erupted in thunderous applause. Luoya, Paul, and Gerlach exchanged smiles and stepped onto the stage. That's right. Senior Lillian actually smiled. Such exclamations spread among the students of the Austin Empire, which made those who heard some rumors couldn't help but suspect the relationship between Lillian and Luoya. On the other side of the stage, a black-haired, blue-eyed young lady in a formal dress held a box in her hand and waited for Luoya. Luoya, Paul, and Gerlach walked to the front of the stage and lined up in a row. Dean Antonio personally presented the medal to the latter two, while Luoya, who was at the front, had the medal pinned on his chest by Melty, whom he had personally rescued. No, this is what I should do. Protecting an upright and kind person like you and maintaining order in the academy is my responsibility as a preceptor. Sir Luoya, I'm from the Austin Empire. Can I join the Blue Rose faction? Upon hearing Melty's request, Luoya smiled and replied. The young lady was touched. The girl said with tears in her eyes. The next moment, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed Roha's cheek under the watchful eyes of everyone. Oh. Although it was permissible for a lady to kiss on such an occasion, it still required a lot of courage for an Austinite to do so. Therefore, Luoya wouldn't avoid it even if he knew about it. Otherwise, he would become a fool who embarrassed the lady. In terms of publicity, this kind of behavior could also play a positive role. The award ceremony came to an end with Luoya and the other two as the finale. However, the enthusiasm of the students in the audience was even higher than before, because it was not the end of the ceremony, but the celebration banquet organized by St. Freya Academy, which was one of the reasons why many people came here. Such a luxurious store lineup could be considered a gourmet exhibition. It was too attractive for foodies, especially for a certain black-haired young man. Walking along the corridor leading to the banquet hall, Luoya Akate looked at the excited students rushing to the rows of tables. He tried his best to suppress his desire to eat. Noah Iyer, who knew him well, couldn't help but laugh. On the other side, Xia Luot also tried hard not to laugh. Hey! You're a prince after all. Can you not be so embarrassing? This is Vivian's Surprise Restaurant's Rainbow Truffle Roast Chicken. Chapter 365. In the noisy banquet hall, while the students held their plates and focused their attention on the envelopes slowly falling from the sky, the black-haired Her Royal Highness had quietly approached her target. Looking at the sweet cake on the fork in front of him, the black-haired young man was shocked. He didn't expect that Lillian would dare to do this after returning to the academy. It was the clear will of Emperor Lucas to forbid Lillian from contacting the members of the Akate family. Although it was still unknown why His Majesty issued this ban, there was no doubt that Lillian, as the Royal Highness, had to abide by it. At least, she couldn't take the initiative to contact them too obviously, let alone this kind of behavior that would expose her intimate relationship. Luoya, who was aware of Lillian's intention, was about to refuse, but before he finished speaking, Paul Aikman suddenly walked over. The young man held the plate and blocked the scene of the two making contact. Luoya was stunned for a while. Listening to Lillian's urging and looking at Paul's back, Luoya was stunned for a while. Worried that others would see him, he could only lean over and suck Lillian's fork in his mouth, then quickly return to his original position. As for the black-haired girl, she walked past the young man as if nothing had happened. The two just brushed past each other as if nothing had happened. Seeing that no one noticed Lillian's behavior, the black-haired young man breathed a sigh of relief, but when he turned his head to look at the girl leaving, he couldn't help blushing. Sure enough. Sister Royal should still be with Brother Luoya. Paul, I hope you can help me maintain the basic contact with Luoya in the academy. The ace agent of the Luoya x Lillian fan club, Paul Aikman, encouraged himself in his heart, thinking about how to create good results in the future. On the other hand, Nuo Ayer and Xia Luot were gnashing their teeth. Damn it! That woman actually found such a helper by Luoya's side. How despicable! Although Luoya had a good temper, it wasn't that he couldn't get angry. In fact, he was usually very dignified. The last time the three girls fought in rows, they stopped because they were afraid that he would be angry. It was only when he was younger that the girls dared to do whatever they wanted. Why is it suddenly so cold? Favorability plus 80, plus 50, plus 20, plus 40, plus 110. Once upon a time, Luoya had looked down on things like favorability points. After all, favorability points were different from things that could make one stronger after exchanging for gold coins. It seemed that favorability points were only useful for developing territories. However, after experiencing the battle with the Saint Heroes Society and the dispute between the girls, a divine artifact had changed Luoya's perception. In this award ceremony, the actions of Luoya and the other two were made known to the public. After knowing what they had done to punish evil and promote good, the students in the audience naturally felt admiration, approval, and other emotions. And after seeing Luoya receive the award, they yearned for it and yearned for it. Director, thank you. No, I should be the one thanking you. In the end, this is the result of everyone's hard work. Chapter 366. Half a month ago, not long after Luoya's body recovered, a familiar yet special experience made him relive the nightmare that he had almost forgotten. That was the second time he saw that pair of beautiful but cold eyes after a year. When that pair of eyes looked at him across time and space, Luoya's body turned cold and his heart seemed to stop. He only woke up when she left. Of course, there was no such thing as love or hatred for no reason in this world. Luoya wasn't surprised that he was targeted by the Mother Goddess. After all, it was because he had absorbed the power of the oracles. However, it had to be said that being watched by the gods gave Luoya a lot of pressure and trouble. That was the problem of Ancestor Estrella. One of the clues was the guardian, Antonio, who survived the war, and the other was the artificial elf, Margaret. As Luoya had only returned for a short period of time, he hadn't contacted the two parties yet. However, Luoya was sure that they didn't have any good ideas. After so many years, there was still no news of the scholar. The only possibility was that things were out of his expectations. This was also the reason why Luoya used the Goddess of Fate's advice. Under the influence of these two forces, Luoya set this goal for himself. As he silently chanted his wish, the blessing in the system was successfully activated. Activation successful. Blessing effective. Ding, It's that easy to obtain. But, what kind of advice was it? Goddess of Fate's advice, time limit, 10 seconds. Looking at the first effect of the Goddess of Fate's advice, Luoya Akut was stunned. Is your but an auspicious sign? It's the blessing of the Goddess of Fate. You can't just spout nonsense. Thinking of this, Luoya took a step forward. He took a deep breath, lowered his waist, and extended his leg. In the next moment, he shot a powerful shot at Paul Aikman's buttocks. Paul, whose chrysanthemum was suddenly attacked, was dumbfounded. He only had time to let out a short scream before he was kicked away by a powerful force. The scream of being strangled was not noticed by the music and the noise of the crowd. However, the scene of Luoya kicking Paul fell into the eyes of the two girls. The black-haired boy didn't know that his actions had unknowingly eliminated the anger in the hearts of the two girls in the distance, thus resolving a small crisis. At this time, Luoya was observing Paul's parabola, trying to figure out how the goddess of fate's advice would affect the goal he set. Such doubts arose in the young man's mind. Under his gaze, Paul dashed toward the crowd ahead. At this time, at the end of the crowd, the old man with a white beard, Antonio, was chatting with the scholars of the school with a serious expression. They were discussing the problem of the Challenger Cup that was held once every few years in Leinster. Every Challenger Cup tournament could be said to be an unprecedented grand event. The impact on the students in the academy was immeasurable. If using the student sports in Luoya's previous life as an analogy, it was somewhat similar to a certain island country's baseball quotient. But in Shia, in the country of scholars, the Challenger Cup's impact was even greater. After all, in terms of scope, if a sport like baseball was based on all the citizens of a certain island country, then spells in Shia were based on the entire human world. And the winner of the fierce spell tournament only represented one thing, and that was strength. In the process, they would burn blood and tears, exhaust their wisdom and courage, and use everything they had to challenge the one and only throne. And the winner would also receive unimaginable fame and wealth. Originally, according to the rules of the previous years, the first years who had no actual combat experience were not allowed to participate. However, the internal and external environment this year was different. Whether to stick to the rules or to break through and innovate, this was a difficult choice, even for these high-level administrators. Seeing that the long discussion was fruitless, Antonio, who was stroking his beard, suggested. However, he did not expect that before his voice died away, a figure had already rushed toward him. At the critical moment, Paul Aikman's figure flashed and descended from the sky. Chapter 367. This year's first-year students were a little unusual. This was something that Dean Antonio had long known. To have so many students that required his attention in one batch was extremely rare even in Antonio's hundreds of years of teaching experience. And the absence of all these talents who had the potential to become the golden generation was undoubtedly a huge regret. Dean. So that's why, did he hear our conversation? Indeed, for Paul, as an illegitimate child, the Challenger's Cup was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prove his worth. It was no wonder he was so excited. Paul Aikman, you want to give us some suggestions, right? It's okay, don't be nervous. As one of the main characters of this banquet, you have the right to voice your opinion. I'm not. Paul, if you don't participate this time, will you have any regrets? This is interviewing my feelings on crusading against the cult. So that's why, these people I don't know are probably outsiders. They might even be the higher-ups of the other Leinster academies. So, this is a competition between the academies. The dean wants to use us to boost his momentum. Got it. Bragging, I can do it. Regret. I'll regret it for life. But you have to know, as first years, there's a certain degree of danger for you to participate. Sigh, the youngsters these days are really something. Listening to the words of the elders, Paul was even more certain of his guess. On the other side, Antonio looked at Paul with eyes full of admiration. The old man smiled and continued to ask. Rivals from the upper years? Security department? Although we're not as strong as the upper years, we have experienced guidance. We can defeat the enemy through experience. Chapter 368. The Challenger's Cup wasn't important in the original game, Recorder's Eye. So, under the Goddess of Fate's advice, using Paul's but to change the reality that was different from the game, how could it help save Estrella and avoid the crisis? On the other hand, if the first years were allowed to participate, as one of the ring-bearers, Luoya would definitely participate in the Challengers Cup. Even if it was according to the ranking of the first years in the school, he would definitely participate in the Challengers Cup because he was the third in the ranking of the first years. As for why he was third, it was mainly because he couldn't touch the first two. From the beginning of the preliminaries, Luoya's opponents all forfeited without exception. Those who didn't know would think that it was a rigged match. Against Noah Iyer, not to mention the difference between the monarch and his minister, Luoya couldn't bring himself to do it. But it was worth mentioning that Noah Iyer met Xia Luod in the finals. The match was quite fierce, and in the end, Xia Luod admitted defeat when he was at a disadvantage. Both sides stopped at a certain point. "Minister, the magma milk ice cream is almost gone. Are you sure you don't want to try one?" Looking at Gerlach, who was holding the ice cream that looked like a volcano model, Luoya couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The next moment, his expression changed and he rushed to the cold drink area. Thinking so, the teenager temporarily gave up thinking for the sake of food and began to taste the delicious food. The banquet gradually came to an end in a happy atmosphere. An hour later, in the teacher's dormitory area of St. Freya Academy, Luoya walked alone on the wide road. His final destination was a beautiful two-story building in this area, and the owner was the only teacher Luoya was close to and his pending relative, mentor Chris. It had been several days since he returned from the north, and Luoya's life had returned to the happy and peaceful track. He bid farewell to the death threat of the King of Curses, and bid farewell to the aurora and snow of Aberville. However, there was one person that Luoya didn't bid farewell to, and that was Ai Lizzie. It was Ai Lizzie's righteousness to examine Chris's character and conduct here. This was because once Luoya objected, it would be equivalent to not treating Ai Lizzie as a family member and rejecting her as an adopted daughter. This was something that Luoya, who was very concerned about Ai Lizzie's feelings, could not do. Moreover, as one of the core members of Akate Territory's intelligence work, Ai Lizzie did indeed have the authority to verify the authenticity of the information. Ever since then, Ai Lizzie had moved into Chris's house and refused to leave. Normally, he would take the time to visit her, but today. "My bed is broken. Take her to your place." Chris, this short sentence made Luoya speechless. In fact, he had been thinking about a problem along the way. Luoya gently knocked on the door of the two-story building in front of him. Chris, who opened the door, smiled when he saw Luoya. He held his forehead and sighed. "Sorry, the banquet just ended. You did a great job this time. Thanks to you, I even have more content to write to you." This. While Chris was stuttering from Luoya's question, a silver-white figure suddenly rushed out of the room and threw herself into the youth's arms, interrupting Luoya's questioning. "Big brother, I missed you so much." Looking at the girl who was excitedly rubbing against his chest like a small animal, Roha's heart began to overflow with pampering. He didn't say anything about it. Looking at the two of them who were so in love with each other, Chris couldn't help but smile. Chris smelled the sweetness and smiled ambiguously. On the other side, Ai Lizzie secretly made a gesture that everything was going well. But for a teacher, this problem didn't exist. Chris's teacher's dormitory was a standalone building. After his family and friends registered, they could move in. Therefore, the current situation was that Ai Lizzie held the right to send letters to the Akate family, while Chris held the right to stay in St. Freya Academy. After thanking Chris for taking care of Ai Lizzie, the black-haired youth waved goodbye to the young girl. The two of them walked along the road towards Tsang's hall. But what the youth didn't know was that at the same time, in front of St. Freya Academy's gate, a luxurious carriage with a sword and shield emblem slowly came to a stop. The tall coachman raised a document and loudly announced the name of the person who came. "Kingdom of Knights, Connaught family, open the door." Chapter 369. There's a carriage in the middle of the night. Late at night, Saint Freya Academy was no longer as noisy as it was during the day. The whole neighborhood was quiet, and the loud carriage was too conspicuous. Of course, it attracted the boy's attention. But what Luoya didn't know was that while he was looking at the carriage, the person in the carriage was also looking at him. In that brief moment, the armored figure in the carriage noticed Luoya. She stood up abruptly, but before she could stop the carriage, the scene she saw made her dispel the idea. Was it a little inappropriate? That girl was his adopted sister. But she remembered that students were not allowed to bring their family members. Williams stopped at this point. The teaching staff went forward and respectfully knocked on the door. After a slightly dull knock, the old man's voice came from the room. When the old man's voice responded, the door lock automatically opened, and Williams walked in. Antonio's closed eyes slowly opened, and looked at the girl in front of him who was wrapped in an inexplicable majesty. "Honorable Sir Antonio, my father is doing well, thank you for your concern." As Antonio spoke, he couldn't help but sigh softly as he recalled the past. Hundreds of years had passed. He had once witnessed the calamity of life, and he was about to witness a new cycle of reincarnation. The smoke and dust of history had passed, but most of his old friends were no longer around. Williams fell into silence as he sensed the deeper meaning behind Antonio's words. The accompanying staff members quietly left the room after the two started their conversation. After the door closed, the young lady finally spoke again. "Duty? It seems that he is very strict with your education. So, Williams, this time you suddenly came to Saint Freya Academy, is there anything I can help you with?" "Transfer school. The Kingdom of Knights has its own academy, you are." "I remember, there is a report on Luoya Akat from my side, right?" Looking at Williams, the white-haired old man was unmoved, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Luoya Akat, this was the bloodline awakener of the ancient family after hundreds of years. As the founder of the Twilight Sage Society, his appearance had attracted the attention of the remaining forces of the Sage Society and the hidden families since a few years ago. But because he had been living in seclusion, there were only speculations and rumors at that time. Originally, Antonio should have used his identity as a middleman to introduce Luoya into the circle of the Kingdom of Knights, and let him enter the eyes of the hidden families, let the shadow eagle of the ancient Austin Empire soar again, and let the King of the Darkness regain his glory. But as of now his understanding of Luoya, Antonio's thoughts gradually changed. And another more important reason was that Luoya Akat showed Antonio a brand new possibility. With this young man as the center, the people gathered around him had unknowingly formed a mysterious force. This force was so huge that it had even reached the point where it could influence the world to a certain extent, and it was still growing rapidly. And what shocked Antonio the most was their response to the crisis. In this process, the hatred of the country was put aside, and the conflicts between religions were also put aside. For the same goal, they worked together at that moment. This scene was simply a miracle for Antonio, who was used to seeing the internal division of humans. Since the Great Migration, the various forces of the human world had never gathered around one person like this. If this force were to fully mature, looking at Williams who was waiting for his answer, Antonio pondered for a moment and slowly opened his mouth. "Yes, but I have a condition." Chapter 370. "I say, AI Lizzie, can you explain why you're in my bed?" Old Sama is awake. "Good morning. Don't you think you've been using this trick too much recently?" "AI Lizzie, don't think you can get away with it." After the two returned to Tsang Hall yesterday, Luoya decided to give his bed to AI Lizzie in order to let her sleep comfortably, while he himself stayed in an empty room on the second floor for the night. Without a doubt, as a dormitory that hasn't been used yet, the condition of the empty room is definitely not very good. This move is completely Luoya's behavior of spoiling his sister. "Old Sama, I'm not familiar with the bed. Although that room is good, I can't sleep." "The bed is indeed not good, but Old Sama, I'm familiar with it." Looking at Ai Lizzie, who said so with a smile, Luoya pointed at the girl for a long time without saying anything. He could only give up and sigh helplessly in his heart. The black-haired boy sat on the bed and looked into the distance. He felt that this was completely different from the plan he made a few years ago to let Ai Lizzie become more and more independent as she grew older. As for Ai Lizzie herself, he didn't have the slightest intention of alienating her as she grew older. The deviation from the past expectations and reality made the boy a little skeptical of life, but this didn't stop the girl from hugging his arm and rubbing against it. After helplessly stopping Ai Lizzie's further offensive, the two washed up and went to the small dining room to have breakfast. It's just that it's worth mentioning that because of Lillian, Ai Lizzie was extremely hostile to Paul, who was also an Archimon, making Paul restless and helpless. He ate with trepidation. Later, Luoya specifically chatted with Ai Lizzie and told her about Paul's situation, only then did she ease up. Of course, not looking for trouble is not looking for trouble, but when eating, she still has to sit far away. Don't even think about looking good, but this is probably the limit of what the girl can do. Ah, Minister, Miss Ai Lizzie, good morning. Looking at the young man with dark circles under his eyes like a national treasure in his previous life, Luoya raised his eyebrows and looked puzzled. And opposite Garak, Paul also had the demeanor of an immortal and stood out from the crowd. He smiled and said good morning to Luoya. Noticing the state of the two, Roha naturally asked for the reason. Behind him, Elisa also stuck out her small head with a puzzled expression. So, under the two's questioning, they heard the reason for the two's ascension, which was to revise for the exam. The mathematics curriculum in St. Freya's Academy was extremely difficult. It had already surpassed the average level of Leinster University. Facts had proven that no matter which world one was in, mathematics was a nightmare for some people. For Paul, who had not received much education since he was young, it was simply a disaster. Then the intensive tutoring began. As a result, after a night of tutoring, Paul was fine, but Jellic was going crazy. The reason was very simple. Isn't that great? So, what about now? Chapter 371. Why do you suddenly want everyone to participate in this? This is not my wish. It's the request of the Dean, Antonio. That's right. Last night, Williams, who was the fastest to travel, went to meet with the Dean of St. Freya's Academy and former member of the Twilight Sage Association, Antonio. This action was originally intended to gain his support. However, what the young lady did not expect was that Antonio did not seem to want them to affect Luoya Akit too much. He even requested for them to transfer schools. As a result, the number of students transferred from St. Fran's Academy in the Country of Knights increased greatly. Teresa was naturally one of them. However, the young lady was not happy about this situation. Instead, she was deeply worried. Therefore, the so-called hidden families were not some heroes living in seclusion in a village. They did not live a miserable life. On the contrary, most of them were famous nobles in Pender, the Country of Knights. As for why they wanted to hide their bloodline, the reason was very simple. Many of the hidden families' bloodline came from other races. While they had great strength, there were also drawbacks. However, what if the bloodline was unstable, had drawbacks, and even violated some of the public morals and common sense of mankind? Under such a comparison of benefits and risks, many families with other races' bloodline began to keep their own situation a secret. Thus, the hidden families were formed. After the Third Era, when Ald was divided into 7 glorious families, without a leader, they began to gradually close themselves off. They became active only in their own circle, and this circle was the Country of Knights. Knowing little about the outside world would easily lead to arrogance. One of the results of this situation among the younger generation was that many members of the Dawn Club in St. Fran's Academy were not ordinary problem children, but super problem children. In the meeting room with the curtains drawn, both sides of the long table were already full. Including Williams, there were a total of 7 people. However, unlike the usual quiet and serious meetings of the mysterious organization, this meeting was unusually noisy. How troublesome. On one side of the table, among the 7 people, a short brown-haired young lady said as she narrowed her eyes. The murderous intent in her eyes could not be concealed. Hearing her words, the black-haired, red-eyed young lady on the other side of the table was stunned for a moment before she happily agreed. Right. That's the former leader's family. If they want to lead us or something, isn't it natural that they are stronger than us? Then the simplest way is to fight, right? Looking at the brown-haired girl, Williams said in a heavy tone. But after hearing her words, the brown-haired girl named Selena didn't remain silent. Instead, she widened her eyes that were shining brightly in the darkness. The combat prowess of that clan's awakened is known to all throughout history. Moreover, just the fact that they're awakened from the Akhat clan is enough to make them qualified to lead us. Their previous clan, the Arde clan, had many achievements. Juliana squinted and licked her lips, interrupting Williams and caressing her cheeks. Upon hearing her words, the Pender nobles began to get restless. You're right. If that's the case, we might as well make our move during the school transfer ceremony. Kill him, or... Chapter 372. At the breakfast table, the news published in the newspaper shocked everyone except Ai Lizzie. After all, as a student of St. Freya Academy, Luoya and the others still knew some of the most basic things. The country of knights was the representative of the physical side of supernatural powers. It was the place where martial arts schools gathered. It had its own St. Fran Academy and had very little interaction with St. Freya Academy. There were not many students who entered the academy from there. As for transfer students, it was unheard of. However, under such circumstances, there was more than one transfer student in the country of knights. Luoya naturally thought of Williams and the others. But from the sudden appearance of the goddess of fate's words, this matter seemed to be related to Gurak. It was the plot of a noble from the country of knights named Brittany who transferred to St. Freya Academy to capture her fiancé, Gurak. After this plot, Brittany would join the main character team. But originally, this plot should have happened much later. After all, Gurak lived a very low-key life here. Under the circumstances where he concealed his identity, no one would be able to find him for a while. But now... it's nothing. Eat more. Looking at the doubtful military advisor Gurak, Luoya, who could roughly guess what would happen in the future, showed a caring expression on his face. He personally handed a piece of bread to Gurak. The youth who received the bread was confused. Somehow, he felt that the atmosphere of this breakfast had become strange. 1 second. Remember, good morning, Senior Lillian. Hearing Luoya's greeting, Lillian, who was still sitting in the front row, gave a faint reply. Her expression did not change as if it was just a polite greeting. However, what outsiders did not notice was that after the greeting, the corner of the black-haired girl's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Her mood seemed to be better all of a sudden. By the way, have you guys seen today's school newspaper? My friend in the school newspaper said that this news was given by the dean. I heard that there will be something more important to announce in the afternoon assembly. The arrival of a transfer student, even if he came from the country of knights, shouldn't be important enough for the dean to send a message to the newspaper. Antonio's action gave Roja a feeling that he was reminding him so that he could be prepared. The black-haired youth made up his mind. As Chris entered the classroom and started the class, the chatter between the students quickly ended. After a month, Luoya once again experienced the hardships of the Hell class. But this time, Luoya wasn't worried about the progress because Chris would give him more classes. Of course, as Christian's extra class was a formal procedure, it caused Lillian's teaching time to be greatly reduced. Lillian was naturally unhappy about it, but due to their identities, the black-haired girl couldn't voice out her grievances. It's really about the banquet, right? You are all favored by the goddess of fate. It was basically impossible for those who transferred from St. Fran Academy to St. Freya Academy to be nobles. After all, who would purposely transfer if they were comfortable in school? A soft sigh dissipated in the noise of the students. After lunch and a short rest, the first-year students began to gather in the auditorium. Luoya and the others entered this solemn building again after a night, but this time, they were the audience. Last time, Paul made Antonio and the others change their minds. What kind of reaction would his words cause this time? Chapter 373. When the 7-person team headed by Williams stepped onto the stage, the excited students who had yet to calm down gave a warm round of applause. All the students present, regardless of their gender, couldn't help but have curiosity in their eyes. Under such circumstances, the first-year students who were already excited couldn't help but feel excited. On the other hand, the transfer students who stepped onto the stage were indeed different. The girl with pink hair and pink eyes was gentle and cute. She had a smile on her face but didn't speak, Teresa. The tall and muscular man who didn't wear any armor, Gelt. The girl with black hair and rare red eyes, Juliana, who was wearing a lace aristocratic costume. When the 7 boys and girls with their own unique features appeared in front of the crowd, the students below the stage immediately began to whisper to each other's ears. Don't you think the blindfolded person is a little handsome? The girls clapped their hands and looked forward curiously. The boys were even more excited. They looked at the girls with unique clothes and couldn't help but comment. No, obviously the one with black hair is better. She has a very elegant temperament. The overly realistic thoughts blurted out, satisfying the curiosity of the students. However, in the audience, beside Luoya, the gray-haired boy's reaction was completely different from the other students. Looking at the golden-haired girl on the stage, Jellic's face turned pale and he trembled like a sieve. He never thought that the transfer from the country of knights was not a student who couldn't stay there anymore, but a big noble of Pender. Among the 7 people present, except for Williams of the royal family, everyone was the heir of a great aristocratic family, especially Teresa and Brittany. Both of them were the daughters of the Duke's family. But this wasn't the main point. The main point was that Gerlach absolutely couldn't meet one of them. The gray-haired boy looked at the girl who was engaged to him on the stage. He covered his mouth with both hands and began to chant crazily in his heart. He tried his best to stop his body from trembling instinctively. At the same time, his mind sorted out a set of reasons why he didn't need to escape now. Looking around the crowd, Gerlach, who felt the sense of community security, breathed a sigh of relief. However, the young man didn't know that the nearby crowd might have provided him with a protective color, but these were far less dazzling than the bright lights around him. On the stage, Williams, who was dressed in heavy armor, looked at the crowd. Almost instantly, she made eye contact with the young man in the audience seats. Following the guidance of her aura, the other 6 people also found the target of their trip. Teresa waved her hand downwards and revealed a sweet smile in Luoya's direction. However, when she saw the gray-haired youth beside Luoya, she was slightly taken aback. For some inexplicable reason, she felt that he was somewhat familiar. The moment she remembered Garek's identity, the girl's pink eyes suddenly widened, but it was too late. Beside Teresa, the heroic blonde girl's body was already surrounded by a thick curse power, and she rushed out like a rocket with a roar. On the other hand, Jellic himself was dumbfounded when he saw the situation. Shortly after, he was scared out of his wits. He instinctively wanted to escape, but it was too late. Boom! It was a pair of golden, mysterious, and majestic eyes. The pupils were like candlelight that flickered with a radiance that could see through one's heart. They were indifferent as though they didn't contain any emotions, but they weren't as sinister as reptiles. Under the gaze of these eyes, the young lady's anger and resentment dissipated rapidly as though sealed in ice. The heavy pressure brought Brittany back to her senses. Realizing that she had lost her composure due to the influence of her bloodline, Brittany fell to the side while Jellic looked at his minister with gratitude. It was only at this moment that the students finally reacted. Amidst the screams, they scattered in all directions and distanced themselves from Luoya's group. What's going on? Revenge? It's Brittany who couldn't hold it in first. You can't blame me now, right? Hey! Wait up! However, before the excited Selena and the joyful Juliana could challenge the young man who stood motionless, a holy, dazzling radiance and spatial ripples descended at the same time. As transfer students, you actually dared to attack the ring-bearers. How unbelievable! Can I interpret this as you challenging the authority of the ring-bearers? However, seeing them appear, Selena and the others didn't shrink back. At the same time, Williams and Teresa arrived one after the other. The armored man wanted to explain, but when he saw the two girls beside Roja, he fell into an inexplicable silence. The two sides looked at each other in silence. Only the aura of the curse grew stronger and stronger. On the seemingly forgotten ceremonial stage, the white-haired elder gazed at the two parties with a glint in his eyes. Chapter 374. Inside the auditorium, with the black-haired young man and the armored Williams as the center, the two major factions glared at each other with swords drawn. Outside the auditorium, Antonio remained silent as if he had turned invisible. The students who were watching the commotion were getting noisier and noisier. If it weren't for the goddess of fate's suggestion, Luoya would have had to accompany Ai Lizzie for lunch today. As a result, he would have entered the auditorium alone. Correspondingly, Gerlach, who wasn't the target of the country of knights, wouldn't have been exposed. The auditorium would have ended peacefully with applause. Gerlach didn't need to run anymore, and Luoya didn't need to chase after him because he had been exposed. Due to Brittany's actions, some people in the country of knights seemed to have changed their attitude toward Luoya. Brittany's loss of control was similar to a broken window effect. As she wasn't stopped in time, she became an example. The young girls named Selena and Juliana began to break free from William's restraints and reveal their true natures. Noah Iyer and Xia Luot were also alarmed by Luoya's involvement. The members of both sides swarmed into the auditorium, which led to the current confrontation. If Brittany had attacked Luoya, the young man could have laughed it off after defending himself. However, the one who was attacked was Gerlach. Naturally, Luoya couldn't forgive Brittany on behalf of others, nor could he hand Brittany over to take the blame. Your Highness Williams, Miss Teresa, long time no see. Please allow me to express my gratitude for your help in the north. Long time no see, Luoya. What, an acquaintance. Your Highness Williams, some of your members were too excited about transferring to another school, which led to some misunderstandings between our friends. I don't think this was the country of knights' intention. What do you think? Williams apologized politely, which made Luoya sigh in relief. However, before the young man could rejoice, the armored figure suddenly looked at Noah Iyer and Xia Luot with hostility in his tone. What? As everyone knows, the country of knights believes in strength. Although we are now in a foreign country, we have no intention of listening to the instructions of the weak. Only the strong can gain our respect. We haven't fought yet, so I don't know about these things. With William's sudden provocation and his public declaration that he would not listen to the ring-bearer's declaration, the audience was in an uproar. Noah Iyer took a step forward and asked with an angry smile. Xia Luot reached into his arms and grabbed the bottle containing the golden soul. So, we can go now, right? I've been waiting for a long time. As a warrior who pursued battle and slaughter all year round, Selena was always interested in the strongest of her enemies, just like Miss Angel who was overflowing with curses. However, before she could launch her attack, a sudden heavy pressure mixed with a bone-chilling coldness suddenly appeared from the side. When the young lady turned her head and focused on Luoya, the black-haired young man looked at her for the first time. When his golden eyes landed on the brown-haired young lady, several shadows suddenly appeared in the young lady's eyes. What followed was an intense fear that aroused Selena's instincts. Chapter 375. When night fell, Luoya, Paul, and Jarek sat around the table in the Broken Sword Tavern in the commercial street of the college, sipping wine and reading the newspaper on the table. The newspaper staff who didn't know the details attributed it to the cultural difference caused by the custom of respecting only the strong in the country of knights. They highly praised Luo Ya's performance in suppressing the other party and defending the authority of the ring-bearers. However, the focus of the report was still on the matter of Antonio encouraging the first-year students to boldly participate in the Challenger Cup competition. After discovering that there were suddenly so many people from the country of knights, Luo Ya immediately understood that the plot in the original work had greatly changed in reality. At least, it was certain that it was no longer the main event. Judging from the current situation, this hostility was especially obvious on Noah Iyer and the others. In the past, when Luoya and Xia Luot first met, Miss Luoya was also angry because Luoya was with other women. However, that was because the two were engaged. Luoya could understand this point. Jarek, the #1 dog-head military advisor of Rose Tsangwei's faction, was the young master of the Pander Stevenson Marquis family in the country of knights. As one of the high nobles, he naturally knew a lot about the situation in the country of knights. However, due to excessive shock, when he left the auditorium, his legs were like noodles. If it weren't for Paul, he probably wouldn't have been able to walk out. One of the reasons for this was that, as the saying goes, alcohol strengthens one's courage. No matter how terrifying the situation was, 2 glasses of alcohol would basically make one feel heroic. Another reason was that the lively atmosphere and crowd in the tavern during the dinner peak would give one a sense of security. Remember in a second. What? That woman is your fiancé? In the Broken Sword Tavern, Paul, who didn't know the cause and effect of the matter, couldn't help but exclaim after hearing Jellick's story. The content of his words immediately attracted the attention of several guests nearby. Seeing this, Luoya hurriedly reminded them. The 3 picked up their glasses and drank. After a long silence, Jellick continued to talk about the situation of the people from the country of knights. In terms of appearance, even though Brittany wasn't as beautiful as Noah Iyer and the others, she was still considered a standard beauty. Besides, due to her years of training, she had a great figure and powerful strength. She also had the bloodline of the ancient Valkyrie. But just like Shia's old rule, there were pros and cons. The bloodline of the Valkyrie didn't only have advantages, but it also had huge flaws. Brani's family had been dominated by females for generations. Their bloodline abilities were far stronger than that of males, but the family head was always a male. The biggest reason for this was that females with the Valkyrie bloodline were emotionally unstable. Brani's condition was considered mild in the family, but even so, Gerlach still couldn't take it. As a girl's gift, it does seem a little bloody. But the country of knights has such a custom, so it shouldn't be a big deal, right? No, that's not the main point. The main point is, when she returned, she was covered in blood and told me that if I had a change of heart, I would end up like these magical creatures. After hearing the gray-haired young man's words, Paul's hand froze in midair. His eyes revealed fear. Luoya took a sip of wine and sighed helplessly. That's right. Back then, the young Brani asked her mother for advice on how to make Jellick like her. If she were in an ordinary family, this wouldn't be a problem. After all, the older, the wiser. But the problem was that this happened in the Lund family. Brani's mother was also a Valkyrie and was much sicker than Brani. With their current relationship, it was obvious that they couldn't resolve this misunderstanding on their own. If no one interfered, perhaps Brani's engagement would be broken off and she would turn completely evil. When that happened, Jellick's life would be in danger. Luoya, who wanted information about the others, started asking questions. Jellick listened and told them one by one. However, compared to the Lund family, who knew everything about Brani, Jellick's information was lacking. There's actually such a thing. How mysterious. But it was better not to know about the secrets of the royal family. Chapter 376. Are Williams and Teresa a couple? Putting aside the fact that there were so many outsiders this time, the last time Luoya met them in Aberville in the north, it was a real accident. At that time, Williams and Teresa still didn't take off their armor, and the two didn't have any intimate actions. Even when they left, it was Williams who put his hand on Teresa's shoulder. Such a thought flashed through the young man's mind, but he didn't say it out loud. He picked up the wooden cup and took a sip of the sweet and malty beer. After ordering a portion of nuts and a portion of jerky to go with the beer, the three of them continued their discussion. Luoya thought for a while and remembered the girl with black hair and red eyes in the Country of Nights. Gurok showed a distressed expression when he heard the words. He thought for a while and said, "As for Juliana herself, she usually doesn't appear at banquets. She only appears at night. I heard that it's because she's afraid of sunburn. I don't know her extraordinary strength, but generally speaking, she's easy to get along with." Listening to Gurok's introduction, Luoya's face showed an expected expression. He, who was familiar with history, actually had some ideas when they met. After hearing Gurok's introduction, he was even more certain. Legend has it that the blood race was born from the blood of Shia. There were also rumors that the blood race was born from the blood of Shia. But no matter which version, it was inseparable from Shia. In this world, having a relationship with Shia basically represented a noble birth. In fact, some human scholars believed that humans were blood race who had lost their abilities after degeneration. Thinking of this, Luoya shook his head and began to recall the brown-haired girl who left the deepest impression on him. He remembered that her name was Selina. That girl was undoubtedly very conspicuous, but it wasn't because of anything good, it was because of the beast-like killing intent. Selina is the daughter of Count Batet. In fact, our relationship is not bad. We have met when we were young, but Selina wasn't like this at that time. Luoya raised his eyebrows and asked. Gurok thought for a while and said, "The Batet family has always been famous for their berserkers. The outside world speculates that the price of their bloodline may be the desire to kill. It's fine during wartime, but it will become troublesome during peacetime. Selina seems to be very talented in that family, so the result is that her ability is even more difficult to control." After listening to Gurok's words, the black-haired young man fell into silence for a while. He didn't expect that the troublesome girl would have such a story. Paul on the side also showed a surprised expression. But when the two were about to let Gurok continue to dig deeper into the Country of Nights, the young man helplessly said that there was not much information left. Gurok scratched his head and said so. Luoya also expressed his understanding. After all, in this era where information wasn't developed, the nobles in the easternmost and westernmost parts of the same country might not know each other. It was already good enough that Gurok knew so much. Luoya didn't forget his original goal. Although it was important to communicate with Williams and the others, Ancestor Estrella was his top priority. What was the relationship between the two that led to the Goddess of Fate's advice being related to the Country of Nights? Dean Antonio. This was the person that Luoya had decided to greet. In fact, when they first returned to the academy, Luoya wanted to visit Dean Antonio with Luoya to contribute to Ancestor Estrella's matter. But after careful consideration, in order to hide their blood relationship, Luoya didn't bring Lillian along. Strolling through the campus at night, the black-haired young man entered the office building where the higher-ups of the academy were located. After showing the ring on his finger to the staff, the special treatment of the ring-bearer in St. Freya Academy played its role. Luoya's request for a meeting was immediately sent upstairs and he received a quick reply. After the meeting was approved, the staff's attitude became more attentive. Luoya responded with a smile. Both of them went all the way to the door of the dean's office. After knocking on the door and receiving permission, Luoya entered this place that could be called the core of St. Freya Academy for the first time. In the classically decorated office, the white-haired old man sitting behind the long table said so with a smile when he saw Luoya. He had already expected his arrival. Under such circumstances, it was reasonable and also the most efficient way to seek help from Dean Antonio. Helping Luoya and getting closer to Luoya was also something that Antonio had to do for a long time. Was it Williams's problem or the country of knights? Dean Antonio, I want to ask you something. The gloves that Ancestor Estrella gave you, do you still have them? ? As soon as Luoya's voice trailed off, Antonio was stunned. Chapter 377. Antonio's current mood was very complicated. Antonio was too careless. He didn't dodge and was hit on the spot, leaving him dumbfounded. After his mood eased a little, Antonio couldn't help but feel enlightened. He could only advise him to take care of himself and reflect on it. Don't play these tricks. When it comes to exposing the dark history, harmony is the most important thing. After the initial shock, Antonio immediately thought about how Luoya knew about these things that even he had almost forgotten, as well as his teacher, Estrid. After a detailed consideration, the old man came to only one conclusion, and that was the legendary bloodline ability of that clan. 400 years ago, a member of the Dusk Sage Association, codenamed Guardian, told me. After listening to Luoya's answer, Antonio's face revealed a wry smile, but at the same time, his mood was lifted because after Luoya experienced that period of time 400 years ago, the biggest communication barrier between Antonio and him disappeared. Assisting in awakening a powerhouse of unknown origin, no matter who it was, this kind of thing would be very cautious. After all, if the awakened powerhouse was an extremely vicious person, then it was likely that it would cause a great loss of life. But if one had a certain understanding of the other party and could confirm that both parties were related by blood, this kind of thing was much simpler. I'm here to ask you, Guardian, Antonio, my ancestor, Estrid, what's the situation now? Is the problem she's facing related to the remaining forces of the Kingdom of Night Sage Society? After listening to Luoya's question, the white-haired old man sighed and said so. He couldn't help but reveal a little sadness on his face. After thinking for a moment, Antonio slowly told the truth of the matter. What? In Leinster 400 years ago, without Luoya presiding over it, the morale of the Saint Heroes Society was very low. In fact, it didn't last long at all. After the Saint Heroes Society's forces were eliminated, the Brotherhood of Redemption launched a siege on the inner city. At that time, the battle was very tragic, and the defenders suffered heavy casualties. The battle that followed was a nightmare that haunted the old man for hundreds of years. The shattered city, the fallen comrades, and countless ordinary people were scattered in the aftermath of the impact of Pulist's curse power. At the end of the battle, it was the scene of Estrid fusing with Chaos Dream. But it's a pity that even the attack of such a shameless person was unbearable for the fragile Chaos Dream. At that time, Madame Estrid, who was severely injured, took the initiative to fuse with the Chaos Dream, in order to protect this treasure that concerns the future of mankind. She used her Dream Demon attribute to restore it automatically at daybreak, but because of that, she fell into an eternal slumber. After this battle, Leinster was almost reduced to a dead city. St. Freya Academy automatically restored itself after daybreak due to Estrid's dream enchantment, but there were less than 100 survivors in the academy. And of course, the tragedy of Leinster had a profound impact on the history of mankind. For that reason, the Human Alliance had even stopped their counterattack against the other worldlings, setting up a special investigation team to hunt down the cultists in their ranks and carrying out a great purge. Due to the terrible impact of the Leinster tragedy, the name of the Lord of Curses, priest, had been erased from history. Hundreds of years had passed, and there were very few who knew the truth of that incident. After hearing the whole story of the tragedy of Leinster, Luoya asked Estrid about the reason why she couldn't wake up. The answer he got was that Estrid's behavior wasn't within the plan, which left the artificial elf, Margaret, at a loss on how to deal with it. At that time, the other reason was the opposition from the Twilight Sage Association. However, in the face of so many difficulties, Antonio didn't give up. In order to save his mentor, he devoted himself to studying Chaos Dream for hundreds of years. As his research deepened, he finally came up with a feasible solution. The blood of ordinary Akit tribesmen is useless. They are very different from the Arde family from 1,000 years ago. Only the awakened bloodline that is closer to the origin will work. That's right, that's you. Another dream demon bloodline in the country of nights. Upon hearing Antonio's words, Luoya narrowed his eyes and his pupils contracted abruptly. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.